You are listening to the In the Mouth of Dorkness podcast, the official podcast of the Alamo Drafthouse, Winchester.
Welcome to another edition of the It Modcast podcast. Joining me is Brian Young, the Turtle Dork.
Happy Friday, folks.
Yeah. And also joining us is Lisa Gullickson, wife dork.
E.T. phone home.
And Brad Gullickson, mouth dork.
I don't have a phone-related quote. TGIFF, motherfuckers!
Oh, swearing.
And I'm your host, Darren Smith, the Disco Dork, and welcome to another edition of the It Modcast It Mod who? What? The
It's
It
an
Modcast
Modcast.
podcast. Fistful Friday.
Power wheels.
Pow,
Man,
power wheels.
I am all over the place in this intro, but you know what? I'm going to roll with it. I'm going to be present, and I'm going to be in the now. That is a reference to a conversation we had before we hit record that listeners, you have no idea about, but it's still a necessary callback because my dorks get it. How are you all doing? Welcome.
Man, I'm
Doing
doing
good.
great.
I'm doing better than last week. Last week, I thought that on the Fistful, I may have gotten a little dark. And I just want to apologize publicly.
I don't even know what you're referencing, Lisa.
I was referencing how now that all my weddings are getting postponed, I'll make it up on the back end with the funerals.
Jesus.
That
I'm
now
right
Brad
there
has
with
made
you.
me repeat the joke.
I'm sorry.
I have regrets.
Sorry. You know, we just
I'm a
living every day,
millennial.
living
I'm a
every day, like
millennial.
Darren says.
Gig
Just
economy.
live in the moment.
Crosstalk
Yeah.
with the Gullicksons.
Skypecast.
This is another Skype cast. Obviously, we are doing this because we are being responsible members of society as we are continuing to practice our social distancing in this crazy time that we find ourselves in. I'm drinking a Rain body fuel drink, so I felt like I had the need to belch, so let me apologize in advance. That was a false alarm, so I'm gonna keep going. But anyway, this week, in honor of this whole social distancing thing, our fistful is, we got a fistful of isolation.
You know what's exciting about this Fistful of Isolation is it's the first Fistful we've recorded not immediately coming after a Weekend Dork review cast recording, right? Because we're doing Skype, we took a couple days, we collected our thoughts, and we're bringing you a fresh batch of energy to this episode.
Oh, I thought you were saying like we prepared in advance, because don't think that we didn't just like hours before this cast go like, guess what, guys, we've already done a fistful of hallways. Oh. We got to come up with another idea now.
Let's be even more real, Lisa. I don't even have my fistful ready now.
You'll be
What?
fine. Brad
you
is
serious,
great off
Brad?
the dome. It's me who's
Yes.
the one who's like feverishly Googling myself.
We're going to
Yeah,
learn
I
this
think,
fistful together.
I think Darren and Brad are always good with freestyling. It's always me and Lisa that's always struggling trying to put
It's-
something together.
It's the
No, Brian,
introverts,
I
man.
think that's not true.
It's the introverts. Introverts are not good off the dome because we like to consider our thoughts.
I would also
Yeah.
just like to point out that Brian just said that I'm good at freestyling. That's the only time that's ever been mentioned.
Oh man, now
I said a
Brad,
hip, hop, shit. That's it. I'm blocked.
you're
I'm
going
blocked.
to be insufferable now. Never pay him a compliment ever.
I like to bring the ruckus. You all know that.
Everybody protect your neck.
All right, Brian, start us
Yeah.
off. You're number 5 in your fistful of isolation.
Oh man. So I guess with some of these isolations, I was kind of thinking like just being in isolation just with like one person, which we all know some of those kind of notable movies of certain people who are isolated. But I kind of wanted to do like groups. Now I got a mixture in my fistful with
There
TV
you
and
go.
movies, but and this could be a number one pick, but this is one I've been thinking about, so I'm just gonna go ahead and say this one. This is The End.
Yes.
starring all our favorites as themselves or a version of themselves. Seth Rogen, James Franco, Jay Baruchel, Danny McBride, Craig Robinson, Jonah Hill. This movie is just a hoot, man. I love it, and it's one of those type of movies that to me actually gets funnier with time. I didn't really think it was that great when I first saw it in the theater, but man, like, I don't know, like, just watching this movie every now and again, like every time I watch it, I just find myself just loving this movie more and more. And I think it's just how they all just really just kind of really are able to kind of poke fun at their own personas and their own personalities, especially people like Danny McBride and James Franco. I think it's just hilarious, and especially in the beginning, before the apocalypse hits, and all the people kind of gets killed in like that big sinkhole, and especially like Michael Cera in the beginning where he's like playing this obnoxious version of himself. Like, it's just so, at least from what we think of him, so left field of what we think of Michael Cera. It's just extremely funny. I don't know, man. And then like when they are in that house and they have to kind of deal with each other, that's when a lot of the comedy really kind of takes off. And I don't know, it's just a riot, man. I think This Is the End is like one of these like perfect isolation quarantine movies, and how if you were stuck with a group of people, a group of friends, and after a while you could kind of start to turn on each other. I think this movie kind of perfectly exemplifies that in a comedic form, and it's just such a fun movie.
I need to watch
pick.
that. That's a great pick.
Jennifer and I are going to have to watch that. That's a great pick. I didn't even think of that one. It's sort of the same thing, B, where I was like, all right, I'm going to have some where it's just a singular person, but then maybe some picks where there's a group of people that are isolated. But that one didn't even come to mind. And Michael Cera, like his monstrous characterization. You know what? This is one of those movies you mentioned, like when you saw it in the theater, you weren't necessarily hip to it at that time. This is one of those movies I had a similar reaction. It's The Big Lebowski. For whatever reason, The Big Lebowski, this movie, and there's one other comedy that when I first saw it, it fell flat to me. And then it wasn't even on the second. It was, I think, on the third random watch of This Is the End. For some reason, it was like I watched a totally different movie, and it was the most hilarious thing I had ever seen in my life. I don't know what it was, but I was in the right mood at the right time to receive the things that maybe I didn't even necessarily notice the first two times or whatever. But yeah, this movie's freaking great. And it's the perfect movie to rewatch while, we're social distancing. So I think, Jennifer and I are going through a list of, because we're watching everything and like, oh, we're running out of shit to watch. But there's no such thing as running out of stuff to watch when you think about it. And this is a perfect movie. So good pick. And also a great recommendation.
What came out first, this one or Your Highness?
Your Highness.
Okay, that's probably why you didn't like This Is the End that much, because you're like, this is no Your Highness, and that's a superior movie.
Is that why?
I think so.
Oh, okay.
I was rewatching Your Highness in clips the other day via YouTube, and man, is that movie a classic? So
You
good.
love that
Best
movie,
stoner
man.
film. Yes, I do.
Best stoner film according to the least stoner person you will ever meet.
Right.
Yes, but there's nothing funnier than wearing a Minotaur's dick around your neck as a trophy.
Whoa, all right. Wife dork.
Yes.
What's your number 5?
My list this week is leaning towards the classic, maybe because it's kind of my comfort zone. And by the classic in this case, I mean the 80s. But my number 5 is E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Particularly, there's a lot of scenes of isolation. Obviously, E.T. is isolated from his home planet.
Sad.
He spends a lot of times isolated alone in the house, drinking beer out of the fridge.
Good day.
And watching classic films about kissing. But the
John
scene,
Ford.
Yeah. So the scene I'm thinking about in particular is towards the end of the movie, where E.T. is starting to die and he is put in quarantine he and Elliot are put in that kind of white tent with like the tube hallways. Hey, this would also have worked for Fistful of Hallways. With his tube hallways. And that particular scene always affected me as a kid. I found sick E.T. kind of scary, actually, and extraordinarily sad. But then when you think about Elliot, and he has this mental connection to E.T. Telepathically. And so when E.T. starts dying, he becomes very sick. And that's the reason why E.T. finally gets found out, because Elliot is having like this very physical reaction because of their connection. But then when E.T. starts to die and Elliot loses that mental connection, because our brains is are the places where we are the most isolated. When we are in our own brain, we are utterly alone. And imagine the relief of having a friend there, having someone there who loves you and enjoys your company, and then having that person taken away, having that entity taken away. So when Elliot loses E.T. from his head, it is devastating to him. And he feels, again, isolated in the way that we all feel isolated.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's a good pick.
Thank you. Because I've used E.T. a lot.
Yeah, but I like the way that it works for this theme. Yeah.
We
nice.
watched that VHS so much that my sister became sick of it and smashed it with a hammer.
You've told that story.
All right.
I have. So that's my number 5. E.T.
All right, great pick.
Thank
Lisa.
you.
All right, B, what do you got? Number 5.
Which B is it?
You, B.
Oh, is it me? Oh, yeah, because he did. Yeah, this is that's right. Brian did. I'm the other B. Okay. So this is the film that I thought of. Well, not the film. This is the story that I thought of immediately when we talk about isolation, and I've seen it referenced over and over and over and over again in the last couple of weeks. So it's an easy grab. But as I said earlier, I am making up my list as I go, and I just think it's a perfect choice, and that's why everyone's been talking about it. I'm talking about The Twilight Zone. I'm talking about the 8th episode starring Burgess Meredith, Time Enough at Last. And it's a story of an apocalypse, and Burgess Meredith is a character who he's playing a character who just is sick of humanity. They're always pestering him. They're always getting between him and his books, and now the apocalypse has arrived, and he is free to enjoy his time with his books. It's everything he's always dreamed of. And you've heard people talk about, self-distancing and going like, this is my time. I've been living for this moment. I have joked about this myself. I'm finally alone with my comic books and my movies and my video games. This is all I need. How great is this? And then Burgess Meredith breaks his glasses, and he is alone with the apocalypse, his books, and no way to appreciate them. So the moral of the story is don't be a dick and get her out and enjoy Friends. Or
be careful with your glasses in the apocalypse.
Yeah. They are precious. So
That's a great one.
That's the story that just summarizes how I think a lot of us are feeling already. But protect your glasses or make some friends. And
I have a couple of pairs of glasses. I don't know if that's related, if I'm like apocalypse hoarding.
Well, the nice thing is our prescription is pretty similar.
That is true.
And so if I break my glasses, I can use your glasses to read.
That's so romantic.
Or I'm just watching them glasses of yours. Go ahead, take them.
Oh, no.
Don't take my
Things
glasses.
don't get dark when it gets like really bad and you're fighting over the last pair of glasses.
Yeah, you never know.
Oh, no.
We can share.
All right.
All right, Darren, it's your turn. Obviously, I know how this goes.
My pick is from 2009. I was gonna do The Martian, but I'm gonna go with Duncan Jones's Moon.
Shit!
I was thinking that too, yeah.
That was my number 2.
I'm sorry, I could change it.
No,
I
I've
can
got
go
a
with
backup.
Martian.
I've got a backup.
Of course you do.
Got a backup.
I I'm going with Moon because Sam Rockwell is amazing in the film. He needs to star in and lead more films. If you are a fan of Sam Rockwell and have not seen the film, then you are in for a treat because he is the lead in this film. He's the main guy in this film, specifically because as this guy who's working on this station on the moon, he's the only person up there, and his only company is Kevin Spacey's voiced robot, and he's mining some material to send back to Earth, and in an effort to prevent spoilers, I'm not going to say what happens into the story that is significant to his character, but something does happen. But until this thing happens, he is isolated up there on the moon, and that affords Sam Rockwell an amazing opportunity to carry an entire film basically on his own. He's in every scene, and you really do. I mean, outside of just the aesthetic of the film, Duncan Jones does an amazing job of shooting this. It's a very low budget film. It's only like costs around like $5 million to make, and he does an amazing job with that as far as the set design, the special effects of when he's outside of the station, the lunar station that he's on, when he's actually out on the moon's surface, to actually when he's inside. But because the film is really centered around Sam Rockwell's character, it's a showcase of him as an incredible actor, of being able to go through these different emotional stages, as you do see eventually what happens to a person who is in a sustained isolation for such long periods of time. And then when there's this thing introduced narratively that has him, questioning.
Don't spoil it.
Yeah, okay, I won't spoil it. All I will say is it is a great film.
Yes.
I don't know that Duncan Jones has matched the greatness of Moon yet.
He has not.
No.
I'm pulling for him that one day he does, but if he does not, we will always have Moon. And again, Sam Rockwell should be the lead in more films. He has proven himself more than capable, not just in this movie, but just in his entire career. But in this movie, he is front and center for the duration, and he is great in it. And it is not an action film. There's not a lot of like super sci-fi stuff going on. You are in a sci-fi setting in regards to like the science of, the lunar station and his mission, but all of it really is just the weight of a character drama that is on the shoulders of a tremendous actor. And so I gotta go with Moon as my number 5. Brian, your number 4.
So my number 4, I'm actually going to pull from television, and this actually comes from one of my favorite sitcoms of all time. That I'm pretty sure I talked about it before, at some point on the podcast. It's Mad About You, and there's a particular episode. And forgive me, I don't know the episode, the name of the episode or from which season it was from, but it was an episode when Paul and Jamie got stuck in the bathroom. I think the doorknob broke or something like that, and they spent and the whole 30-minute episode was basically them stuck in the bathroom, together, and it was basically an isolation episode where they were fighting over food. They found I think they found some breath mints in their pocket or something, and they tried to ration it out so they could eat it over time. And they were just trying to do things just to kind of bypass the time and things like that. And it was just such a funny episode, and one of the more memorable episodes that I remember, just because I just thought that Paul Reiser and Helen Hunt had great chemistry, and probably one of the best on-screen couples that I've seen, whether television or film. That's the one thing that just drew me to that show. I love the characters of Paul and Jamie in that episode where they were isolated and stuck in the bathroom. Was pretty funny. It was basically them kind of stuck on a desert island. So yeah, that's my number 4, Mad About You.
Sometimes I think Brian and my dad are the same person.
There is one instance of Mad About You where I think about it, I swear, like twice a month. And it was, I guess Paul Reiser was about to go work at the same office as her. And she's like trying to get him ready for what it's going to be like to work in the same place. And so she says, what about when so-and-so at work calls me Senorita Sexy Pants? And he goes like, why would he call you, why is he calling you Senorita Sexy Pants? She goes, when I've got my sexy pants on. So whenever I put on pants and I'm sexy in those pants, I'm like, I'm Senorita Sexy Pants, just like Mad About You. It's like like one of those like life earworms where it's just like, why? Yeah. I think about it like, I swear, like every once in a while I put on a pair of pants and I'm like, Senorita Sexy Pants, Mad About You.
Well, thanks, Lisa, because now every time I put on pants, I'm going to be Senorita Sexy Pants.
That's right. That is a joke that would not fly nowadays. Seems insensitive on many levels.
All right. Am I just making shit up, or are they rebooting that, or
yes, they are.
They are?
They are.
Yeah. How does that make you feel, Brian? It might already exist.
You know, I do remember hearing something about that. It's going to be interesting because when the show ended, because they were trying to get pregnant and have a baby, and they did have a baby, Mabel. So I think if they do revise it, it will probably be them, an older couple with their daughter Mabel, probably in their early 20s. That'll be an interesting dynamic to see Paul and Jamie now.
Well, apparently, according to the internet, it should already exist in the past. Because I just did a quick Google, and it says it's 20 years after Mad About You had its last episode on ABC. Helen Hunt and Paul Reiser are reprising their roles in a 12-episode reboot, airing on Spectrum, which means you'll never see it.
Yeah,
and,
that was it.
It was the 2019 version, so it came out in 2019 on November 20th. So
okay, so that was just about 5 months ago. You can binge it now.
Do you want to shell out for Spectrum?
That's the thing. I do remember hearing about that. And when I saw Spectrum, I was like, that's weird. Because the show was on NBC. So I don't know why. Well, I don't know. But I'll look for it. But who the hell has Spectrum? I don't even know what Spectrum is.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know what
Might
that
as well be on Moon. It can be.
Oh. All right, Lisa, your number 4?
My number 4, I decided to go with a very recent film. It's now available on Amazon Prime Cinema, and it is Invisible Man, Lee Whannell's Invisible Man. Okay. Because Elizabeth Moss is utterly isolated because she is the only one who knows that her abusive husband is still alive and invisible. And it's an incredibly lonely feeling film because literally everybody backs away from her. Everybody thinks that she is crazy and treats her as if she's crazy, to the point where Aldous Hodge literally just leaves her alone to lose her mind. Mm-hmm. And so if you did not get to see it in the cinemas, it's an amazing masterpiece of a film, I think. I found it to be the beginning of the film so scary that I thought maybe I'd not be able to handle it.
Oh, wow. Really? Yeah.
It's another one of those movies where it's like once the violence starts happening, I'm like, phew. Because the suspense of knowing that he is there and unseeable was so disturbing to me.
Yeah, it is. It is. You can feel it in almost every shot of that, especially in that first act.
And then everybody's refusal to help. Not just a refusal to believe, but a refusal to come to her aid.
Yeah.
Is so isolating.
Yeah. All right. Great pick.
I'm nailing it. 2 for 2.
You are Brad.
Yes.
Your number 4.
So we're recording this on the day that horror filmmaker Stuart Gordon passed away, sadly, at the age of 72. Too young, I say. Yeah. Stuart Gordon is probably most famous for being the director of Reanimator and From Beyond and Castle Freak, 3 movies that I just absolutely adore. He came out of the same theater troupe that produced David Mamet and William H. Macy, and he's made movies that I think diehard fans of Reanimator and From Beyond have either denied themselves or just completely ignorant to, and they should really seek them out. And I'm talking movies like Edmund with William H. Macy, Kingdom of the Ants with Kari Wurr and George Wendt. And my film for number 4 is Stuck.
Ooh, I don't know this one.
And Stuck stars Mina Savari and Stephen Ray. And the basic premise is Mina Savari's out driving around, and she hits a homeless man who collides on top of her car's windshield, crashes through, and becomes stuck inside the glass. And she drives all the way back home in a panic with the homeless man still in the windshield, trapped, bleeding, and dying. And it's based on an actual case that Stuart Gordon had read about and was trying to understand how could a human being return home with the still barely breathing body of her victim trapped in the windshield of her car. And it's all about the immediate fallout of, what do I do with this man in my windshield of my car? And it is so upsetting and very scary. And the isolation in that is Stephen Ray as the homeless man, completely isolated from society because he is a homeless man, where he can just disappear, where a woman can go like, he's not as worthy as I am. He's a bum. And the film itself is pretty much isolated to this one setting of her house and the garage. If you have not seen Stuck, you should really check it out. But it's not like I'm having a good old time with Reanimator.
It sounds like a nightmare.
It's a nightmare movie. It's an uncomfortable movie. It's an anxious movie. It's one that you have to be prepared to watch. But it is a movie that should be mentioned when talking about Stuart Gordon, because Reanimator is going to go down in history as one of the great B horror movies of the 80s, and deservedly so. It's a masterpiece. But Stuck is equally as good and not talked enough about.
It reminds me of that one Creep Show, I think it's a Creep Show 2 story. Thanks for the ride, lady. And
yeah.
She hits the guy.
Yeah.
And she keeps driving. He gets stuck to the car and takes him home.
Yep.
Is that Creep Show 2?
It's definitely not 1.
Right.
I think it must be Creep Show 2, yeah. Yeah.
All right. Great pick. My number 4 is Pixar's WALL-E.
Oh.
The premise behind that movie is there are these robots that are created to clean up and compact and organize the trash that's left behind from all of the greedy and wasteful human consumers who have bought up everything and used up everything and fled Earth to go live in these admittedly really cool like spaceships that have everything. I'd be lying if I said I didn't want to live on one of those ships. And so WALL-E's left all alone on Earth, or so he thinks, by himself to clean up and pick up the trash after all us messy humans. If you haven't seen WALL-E, I'm not going to say that's weird because, people miss movies all the time. I will say, though, you should see it. It's one of Pixar's better movies. And it does an amazing job with storytelling. The first 30 or 40 minutes of that movie without dialogue. So you have story and narrative and emotion told through moving pictures, which is really the essence of film, right? and there's some beautiful imagery throughout, and even once the dialogue starts, you still have a really heartfelt story, and the heart of that film is, of course, Wally and his relationship that he would grow to have with Eva, and the animation is superb and top notch. And I haven't seen this film in a while, but the animation style and the story the story structure is the thing that sticks out to me the most. I found myself really enjoying the film. It's one of those films though, like when I think about it in hindsight, because of the way the story is told without dialogue in the first half of it versus how it's told with dialogue, and also what happens in the second half of it. I'm about to sneeze. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Sneeze in your elbow.
It is. What did you say? Did you say knees to my elbow?
No, I said make sure you sneeze in your elbow.
I did. The end part of it. The inside part of it. I was gonna say knees to my elbow. That's a new one.
But that's all. That would also work, because if you put your knees to your elbow, you'll be sneezing right into your crotch.
Oh, all right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, yeah, my
Which
number
would
4
be
is
a
Wally.
horrible way to catch COVID from somebody's crotch.
Okay, Brian, you're number 3.
So my number 3, I had a couple films that that's been kind of been circling like my next 2 spots. So, but I think I'm actually going to go with something. I'm gonna pull a little bit of an audible.
Oh.
And I think I'm gonna go with a movie, kind of going a little bit to what Elisa was saying with her ET pick with her number 5. I'm gonna go with the film The Guilty that we saw at Fantastic Fest. I think like a couple
Such
years
a
ago.
good pick, Brian.
Nailed it.
I think with The Guilty, it's not even really like it is isolation physically as far as like where he is trying to help this person out, but I also think it's just the isolation of him not being able to be there to help this person and being at the desk, and playing into that whole the idea of isolation and wanting to kind of like even physically being there, and the reason that he is behind the desk and wanting to be able to help the person on the other end of the phone, and knowing that he can only do so much, like he's literally almost his hands are tied as far as what he can do trying to help this person just through the phone, and that just gives you such a sense of isolation and just wanting to just be able to kind of do more for some or help somebody and wanting to do more for them when you really can't. And I don't know, I think that movie just really kind of speaks to that idea of isolation in that manner. So yeah, I think that's my number 3, The Guilty.
That's a good pick.
All right.
I love that movie.
Pick. Wife Dork, you're number 3.
My number 3, I decided to go with a Hitchcock film. And there are so many options when it comes to isolation in Hitchcock.
I'm curious.
Obviously, you got Psycho. You've got Rear Window.
Oh, Brian could be watching all of these in his isolation because he has my
I'm
Blu-ray
so
box.
sorry, Brian. I know that Hitchcock is a very sore subject for you.
No, it's my own fault. It's my own
It
fault.
is his fault. He
But-
should
I know.
he should watch my movies.
I decided to go with the 1963 classic The Birds. And this, again, works on many levels because Tippi Hedren goes to this island to meet this guy she met in a pet store. But then when upon her arrival, she's attacked by a seagull. And because of that, he tends to her wounds. And she is now trapped she is now in his house. So she is isolated from everybody that she knows. And then all of a sudden, shit starts going sideways. And people are being attacked by birds. And now she can't get off of this island. And it also works because as the birds start attacking, people are having to run separately into their homes. And so eventually, by the end of the film, Melanie is in the house with the Brenners. And it feels so suffocating because there's the little sister who's obnoxious. And then there's the mother who is openly being rude and disapproving of her. And then there are the birds. And so eventually, like, the birds start entering the home and they have to leave that place. But that is kind of what it feels like right now, where it's just like the outdoors is now considered this dangerous place and we're all retreating. And what you're afraid of is that danger that is outside entering your home. Yeah. And now all of a sudden that thing that we're all hiding from is here. And we all feel ourselves going a little bit crazy, which Melanie goes by the end of the film.
Good pick.
Good pick.
Brian, I know what you're thinking. Don't you dare do an audible and put Birdemic.
Oh, wow. Jesus. Oh, man. Yeah, man.
All right, great pick, Lisa.
Thank you.
Brad, you're number 3.
My number... No, this is my number 2, right?
No, that's your number
You're
3.
number 2.
No, 3.
You're number 3.
Is it my number 3? Damn, I'm losing it. I'm losing it. Shoot, because this is what I wanted for my 2. Well, guess what? I've messed up my own brain. So this was the first story I thought of after the Twilight Zone. Like it's a scenario where it's like, okay, the apocalypse has arrived. This ain't so bad for so long. We can enjoy this. And it is George Romero's Dawn of the Dead, where a small group of folks have all gathered at Monroeville Mall in Pittsburgh, and they have hunkered down amongst all the stores, and they have all the contents of all these stores to their disposal. And for a while, they're having a pretty darn good time, enjoying each other's company. And all the dresses they want, all the suits they want, all the guns they want, all the sporting goods they want. But then, of course, the outside world comes to them, and it's not the zombies that they have to be afraid of. It's the roving biker gangs led by Tom Savini that they should really be concerned about. And the roving biker gang penetrates the paradise of the Monroeville Mall and ruins it all. And they have to return to the outside world with the zombies and the Day of the Dead in their future, although we never see those characters again. But I love the original Dawn of the Dead, and I really like the Zack Snyder remake as well. But I prefer Romero's, especially those early sequences where it is so quiet and isolating. Even though the same experience happens with the remake cast, I think what Romero really accentuates is the loneliness of being inside that mall and the emptiness of that mall when there's only 5 people there.
Yeah. Okay. Great pick. I swear to you, when Lisa, I was paying attention when you were talking about the birds. I promise I was. But as you were talking about the birds, I was thinking the 1-2 punch of Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could do any zombie movie.
Well, certainly the Romeros. I mean, even Day of the Dead, when they're all isolated in the bunker and it's all the military people together. I mean, that's an isolating experience as well. And like Day of the Dead's the most isolated character is probably Bud the zombie, right? Yeah. So that's an interesting take on that. I'm gonna
do a shout out to the indie dork, and I'm gonna just throw the battery out because I know that will probably be on his Fistful of Isolation. All right, great pick, B. Instead of using the Hateful Eight, because I'm afraid Wife Dork could be like, oh no, that's gonna be my number
I
one.
don't have it. Seemed too obvious to me.
Right, good. Great minds think alike. I'm gonna go with 10 Cloverfield Lane.
Nice.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's a good pick.
Directed by Dan Trachtenberg, starring Mary Elizabeth Winstead, John Gallagher Jr., and also John Goodman. Really, outside of the movie, I'm just going to talk about my experience in seeing the trailer for the first time. If you haven't seen the movie, do yourself a favor. While you're practicing social distancing and while you're inside, definitely watch this movie. It is very appropriate. You will enjoy it. The less you know about it, the better. But that's what makes my initial viewing of the trailer so memorable. I can't remember what movie I was going to watch, but it was similar to the experience of the original Cloverfield trailer. So whatever screening I was at, the trailer for 10 Cloverfield Lane comes on, and to this point, there had been no type of publicity, no type of behind the scenes making of, or any type of casting information, any type of news and variety. Hollywood Reporter reports Dan Trachtenberg working on a new blah blah blah. None of that. There had been nothing. This trailer comes on, and none of it is indicative of a Cloverfield movie, but the way that it's edited was perfect. But then, like, the title comes up, and it says Cloverfield, and then 10 and Lane comes up. I think it was the sequence, or it was either the number 10 comes up, and then the word Cloverfield comes up after that trailer, and then the title comes up, and then the theater gets dark, and everyone's like, what the fuck? And for me, the only thing I could think about for the next hour and 40 minutes was that trailer. I can't remember what movie I saw, but during that movie, I just kept thinking about, holy shit, what is that movie?
Yeah, I remember it was 13 Hours, the Michael Bay movie, because it was because that movie came out in January, and it was exactly 2 months before that movie was going to come out in March. And that was another thing.
Yeah, they showed the release date, and I was like, "Oh shit, that's like right around the corner. What the hell?" So I was floored by the marketing of that movie, and I thought that was amazing. And it was a shame because I remember, like, 13 Hours. I really enjoyed watching that movie. Like, I really enjoyed that film. I think it's one of Michael Bay's better films. And so, but throughout that movie, I just kept thinking about, holy shit, how did they pull that off? Like, that was amazing. That the marketing of that is amazing. Plus, it looks intense. Like, what is it? Is it tied to Cloverfield? Like, is it just like a coincidence that Cloverfield is just in the title? Like, what is it? But again, the movie would come out 2 months later. I saw that movie, and it was really entertaining. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. That is another movie that I think I'm going to watch. I don't know that Jennifer's seen that, so that'd be a cool watch for her as well. But yeah, that's going to be my number 3, 10 Cloverfield Lane.
And then they dropped Cloverfield Paradox during the Super Bowl, and you're like, oh my God, they've done it again. And then you watch that movie.
Whoops. They dropped something in the toilet. Brian, your number 2.
So my number 2, I guess this can kind of go in a little bit of the category of Stranded as well, but it's also Isolation. I kind of wanted to go with one of the more notable movies, but I think I'm gonna do a little bit of a curve here and pick another Fantastic Fest film, and this was one that we saw last year, and it's currently streaming on Netflix. It's a movie called Sweetheart.
Yeah, good one.
Starring Kiersey Clemens, directed by J.D. Dillard, who's a great filmmaker. He did the small indie film Slight, which is criminally underseen, a really, really good movie. And J.D. Dillard, man, because he was at Fantastic Fest, and yeah, and that dude, like, we talk a lot about Taika Waititi and, like, how he can, like, control, like, his charisma and how he can, like, manage a room and control, like, the room. J.D. Dillard kind of has that same energy, because I remember I saw Sweetheart opening night, so this was after Jojo Rabbit, and I think I saw Jojo Rabbit, First Love, and Sweetheart on opening night, and J.D. Dillard did a Q&A. And he was so funny, so engaging. He's just a funny dude. And he reminded me of a little bit of Taika Waititi, like the way he could control a room in that manner. And I was like, okay, I like this dude. I want to see, like, everything that he does next. And we just find out that he's writing and possibly directing a Star Wars movie. We'll see what happens with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or at least in development.
It's in development. I interviewed him for Film School Rejects at the last Fantastic Fest, and we met, like, in the lobby of this hotel somewhere in Austin. I can't even remember. And we talked. We were only supposed to talk for like 20 minutes, but we talked for nearly an hour.
Oh, man.
And at the end of that, we were talking about what's he going to do next, and he started telling me this idea he had for a like a Game of Thrones like fantasy world with a hero like the hero in Slight, just wielding a giant broadsword. And he just wanted to see that guy wielding a broadsword. And that was going to be his movie. But now he's got Star Wars, and I'm excited about Star Wars and all that. But I want to see J.D. Dillard's epic sword and sandal movie.
Yeah, he's a cool cat, man. I like that dude a lot. So yeah, his movie Sweetheart, check it out on Netflix. It's basically it kind of just opens with Kiersey Clemons stranded on an island, and she's just trying to survive, and it's crazy because he even talked about this in the Q&A at Fantastic Fest. He was like the kind of the impetus or the genesis of his idea of this was that flare shot. And I don't want to give anything away in the movie because most people probably haven't seen it. Definitely check it out. But there's a flare shot because there might be a creature or a monster on this island. I don't really want to give anything away. And I think the movie does a really good job of not letting the audience kind of know if this is real or not, because it's easy because of the fact that Kiersey Clemons is isolated on this island. Is this all kind of happening in her head? And even while watching the film, I was kind of thinking that. I was like, okay, is this going to be one of those movies that does that kind of switch where it's not really there, or is it? And I like how the movie plays with that a little bit. So I think it's really kind of genius the way he kind of toys with the audience with that. But it's this great shot where she's trying to get help, and she sees a helicopter and she lets off this flare gun, and the flare gun goes out into the sea, and as it's coming down, you see kind of like the silhouette of this creature, and it's a great.
You weren't going to give it away, Brian.
God damn it, B.
Oh, but that. I didn't. Oh, but I didn't. I think what I was trying to say. Shit. Okay. I'm done.
But
check it out. It's on Netflix.
It's a good monster movie.
Oh man, I did terrible.
Bet you're feeling pretty isolated now by the mistake you just made, Brian. I'm with
Brian
you,
is my number 2.
Yeah, I am. God damn it.
All right, Lisa, you're number 2.
Cut around that, D.
There's no cutting around in the apocalypse. My number 2. It's my turn, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
As we know, my number 2 was Moon. Darren Dunn stole it. Then my number 2 was Green Room, but then I thought, oh, that's too similar to my choice of The Birds, because it's like you're isolated from this onset from the outside. And so then I decided, I was racking my brain, and I guess because I was thinking about The Birds, suddenly what came to my mind was a film that we saw at the Alamo Drafthouse Winchester. Please support it if you can. It's one of the. Yep. It is the theater of which we are the official podcast, but they're coming up with some very creative ways of creating revenue during this time.
Virtual screening room with Film Movement. Go check out their Facebook page, Alamo Winchester.
Check it out. But I mentally transported myself back to Full Metal Modine weekend when we got to spend a full 3 days with the impeccable, indescribable actor Matthew Modine, and one of the films we got to see was Birdie.
Oh yeah. Oh man.
He is extremely isolated. The character of Birdie, the way Matthew Modine describes him is he's like one of life's delicate, beautiful people that reality kind of mishandles and breaks. And he is a kid who feels this beautiful kinship with birds to the point where in his heart he really feels that he could be a bird. and he is drafted into the Vietnam War, and he becomes a POW and is missing for several days or months, I can't remember. But then his friend Al, who is played by Nicolas Cage, also, he actually enlists into the army, and they both end up at the same military hospital. Al, because he suffers an injury to his face. I can't remember the context. But Birdie is suffering from the mental stress of being a prisoner of war, and he has this mental breakdown that leaves him catatonic. And so while he is in the hospital, his friend Al makes it his mission to help his friend speak again. And so he's spending all of this time with his friend Birdie, reminiscing about the magic of their childhood and all of the escapades they went together. But he's just not getting through. And there is this doctor also on site who is trying to release Al and saying, like, your injuries are not that serious. You can go back to Vietnam. You're ready to go back. So there is this urgency to Nicolas Cage's character clinging on to his friend and trying to prove that he is of service in that place by being able to open Birdie up. And through the course of the film, so they spend so much time in Birdie's cell. It's like not a proper hospital. It's like a cell. And over the course of the film, it seems like Birdie is in his mind getting his wish and becoming a bird. And there is this one shot that is like forever etched into my mind. And it is Matthew Modine completely nude and perched like a bird on the edge of his bed, like on the like railing of his bed. And you just see this back shot, and you just see the perfect heart shape of his buttock as he is balancing himself on this bar. That movie, like, it was interesting hearing Matthew Modine speak of that movie, because he felt like as an actor trying to portray Birdie, he really went into himself to find this extraordinarily delicate person. And it's a film that Nicolas Cage refuses to even talk about because he thinks it's such a piece of trash of a movie. And if Nicolas Cage finds it to be a piece of trash, that is saying something. Because his bar is lower than the nude Matthew Modine's perch in the hospital. So,
damn.
But that is a movie of profound isolation, the mental isolation of Birdie as a character, and then his physical isolation in this cell.
Damn, Lisa.
All right, great pick.
Thank you.
Oh, man.
All right, Brad, you're number 2.
Nicolas Cage is a treasure, Lisa.
Thank you.
Oh.
I took credit for Nicolas Cage.
So you mentioned The Hateful Eight, and I think that is a great pick for an isolation movie, and it is one of the movies that Lisa and I watch every time it snows. We just have to watch it. But the film we watch alongside The Hateful Eight is the even superior isolation movie. It's John Carpenter's The Thing.
The Thing.
And in particular, the final moments of John Carpenter's The Thing, where Childs and McReady are alone around a campfire, unsure if the other is the thing, and actually unsure if they are the thing or not. Because this creature can mimic you so perfectly down to every little morsel and molecule of your being. If that's the case, then can it also mimic your mind? And are you who you think you are? And the isolating experience of that knowledge is really, really terrifying. And then that's when the film ends. They'll just wait to see what happens. And that has to be my favorite ending to any movie, anywhere, everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, great pick. That is on this list as well. My number 2 is from my favorite living director, Quentin Tarantino. It is a horrible place. It is a horrible idea. It is a very inhumane place and idea. It is the hot box in Django Unchained.
I thought you was going there.
In the film on Candyland Ranch, when Django gets to his ranch, he's going there to rescue his love, Brunhilde. And when he gets there, he sees that she has been taken and put into the hot box, which is, a solitary confinement of sorts. That's a hole in the ground, basically, out in the southern sun. And at this point in the story, Django is basically in character, undercover. He has a role to play, and it's very important if he wants to succeed in his mission that he doesn't break character. But seeing Brunhilde being taken out of this hole in the ground, again, this very inhumane treatment, this horrible, ugly treatment, it takes everything in him. And I think outside of the amazing gunfights at the end of the film and everything else that Django does, it is a moment of incredible strength for him to restrain himself to do what needs to be done to play the long game in order to save Brunhilde, because to see the woman he loves most, the thing that he loves most, being treated the worst in this moment, it takes everything within him not to kill everybody right then and there, which would then most likely make things go sideways and result in the death of both he and Brunhilde. It takes everything in Django not to outwardly react to the horror of seeing her pulled out of that hole in the ground. Outside of all the story stuff and the character stuff that's going on in that particular moment, there's just that idea of that hot box and the psychology of that, just the actual physical, inhumane nature of that is horrifying, right? Because the people who are put in there, firstly, before you're even put in there, you're already dealing with some horrible shit. Because if you're in that box, that means you're a slave, and you're already dealing with what that is. And now you're being separated from everyone else that you're put in this box. You're dealing with the heat. You're dealing with the isolation and then the continued mental and physical abuse. And so it's just the very idea of that is a horrible thing. And it's one of the things that is so terrible about isolation is when you're with yourself and you're without human contact, and you only have your mental state and your physical fortitude, and you're only able to sustain yourself physically for so long. But then, mentally, once that starts to break down, you can go to some horrible places before you even start to deteriorate physically. And so just the idea of that, the psychology of that, to me, I found really horrifying. And it's a very striking image in that film. And that moment in that particular scene is a really hard moment to watch too. But for the character of Django and also Brunhilde, to see like her survive the stuff that she survives on that ranch, what she's gone through, it just shows the indomitable strength of those two people. And so that's my number 2 in my Fistful of Isolation, the hot box. Brian, your number 1.
So my number 1, I guess I don't know, still feeling a little shitty for my number 2 pick.
Oh no.
Damn, man. All right. Well, I was on such a roll, man. I fumbled that one.
Don't beat yourself up. You just teasing
I
you.
still beat myself up over Aaron calling me out for spoiling the arm break in Green Room.
Oh yeah.
I can't think about that film that I love without the shame. The shame.
No one listens to us anyway. We ain't spoiling shit.
Aaron does, and he tweets about it.
Sweetheart's been on Netflix forever.
That's right.
Yeah. There you go. So my number one, I'm gonna lighten it up a little bit. It's from a TV show, another one of my sitcoms from the '90s. I don't know. I thought about this and I was like, yeah, I gotta use this. So maybe some people some of our listeners may not be familiar with some of the episodes or the TV series Martin. Of course, I'm a huge fan. Of course, we've talked about Bad Boys and my love of Bad Boys, and now the Bad Boys trilogy. I can finally say that with confidence.
Yeah.
But Martin, his sitcom in the '90s, he had an episode where him and all his friends were stuck in his apartment due to a snowstorm. And this is such a great episode that it's got some great one-liners, some iconic lines that a lot of people still quote. So him, Gina, Pam, Tommy, and Cole were all stuck in his apartment. His heat got turned off because he didn't want to pay the $5. And bruh man from the 5th floor came through the window in the middle of a snowstorm. They sent Cole out to get food, and he froze outside. And there was another great moment when Gina farted, and Martin was like, "Well, my mouth was open." Oh man, it was such a great episode, and it was just the 5 of them just stuck in his apartment with no heat, trying to get out to get food and having to deal with each other. And I kind of want to spoil a little bit of it.
Don't you do it.
That is your
taught
want.
you nothing.
Okay, yeah, you're right. Because it's such a good episode, man. It's so funny. But yeah, that's my number one is Martin. He ain't paying the $5.
I thought you were gonna maybe go with like the Night's Watch as being sent to the wall and being isolated like on the wall.
Oh damn, yeah, that would have been good. Game of Thrones, that would have been a good one. Yeah. I had to go with my boy.
Yeah. All right, Wife Dork, your number one.
My number one is it's the isolation of profound, directionless loneliness, and it is the 1967 The Graduate.
Oh.
Brad and I kind of recently rewatched this film because Brad had never seen it before, and he was doing an episode of Missing Frames with Sean. I just forgot his last name. Eastridge. We're on first name basis. We're buddies. We went to Sundance together. But the main character of that film, I've lost his name.
Benjamin Braddock.
Thank you. Benjamin Braddock. Dustin Hoffman. He has just graduated from high school, and he has no idea what he wants to do. And everyone around him is asking him for his next move. And all he can say is, like, bullshit. Like, he has nothing. And so there's this one scene where he is just, like, lazing in the pool. And he is incapable of enjoying his time because he is so lonely. And because of that loneliness, he ends up in a relationship, a consensually gray relationship with Mrs. Robinson, played by Catherine Ross. And then he ends up in kind of this hostage situation where he wants to get out of this relationship, and she does not want to allow him out of it. And it is this secret. And that is further isolating him from his family and his peers. So yeah, there we go. That's my Fistful of Isolation with Benjamin Braddock as my number one.
Great pick.
Thank you.
Creative.
Across the board, great picks.
Yeah,
by Disco Dork.
Yeah, you were like, I'm not going to pick the stuff that Brad's going to pick. I'm not going to be obvious.
Yes. So I have your number one written right here.
Oh,
so,
do you?
Yeah,
do you
I do.
have my number one?
I mean, it should be your number one if it's not your number one.
I don't know if you know my number one. But now I want to know what you think my number one is.
I want to guess.
What's your guess, Darren?
It's Roy Scheider and Richard Dreyfuss floating out in the ocean.
That was my first guess,
no,
but I'm not going to
no.
go with my first guess. I'm going to go with...
That was my guess, too.
Are you going to go someone who's buried alive?
No, I'm not.
Buried alive.
Oh, Ryan Reynolds.
Nope. Nope.
I was going with
Beatrix
The Shining.
Kiddo.
No, not The Shining. Not The Shining. That's a great pick, though. That's
Thank
a great
you.
pick.
All work and no play.
Originally I was like, my number one pick has to be Khan from The Wrath of Khan, right?
Oh, yes.
Ricardo Montalban, and how he was isolated by Captain Kirk during the original series, left to his own devices to build and stew in his rage. And when he finally got his ass off of SETI Alpha 5, by stealing the Reliant, he went guns blazing, phasers set to kill against the USS Enterprise. But I actually thought a more
Look who's going for
terrifying
a twofer.
an upsetting form of isolation occurs in one of the most maligned Star Trek films of all time. And no, I'm not talking about Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, which is one of my all-time favorites and is absolutely underrated. I'm talking about Star Trek Generations.
What?
And the beginning of that film, we see the quote-unquote death of Captain James T. Kirk by the Nexus, by this energy wave that consumes him, where he is now lost in this realm that is only there to cater to his needs. So everything he's ever wanted or desired, any opportunity that he regrets that he could fix, the Nexus allows him to relive moments of his life. And it is a poisonous contentment. And he is stranded within the Nexus for 100 years until he is retrieved by Captain Jean-Luc Picard, who falls into the Nexus because of Malcolm McDowell's evil scientist who's been trying to return to this energy beam, who has been destroying planets and stars so that he can navigate the path of this beam. And he wins, sending Picard into the beam. Now, while he's in the beam and he wants to get out, he's going to need help. And he knows that Captain James T. Kirk 100 years ago met his end within the Nexus. And he goes and finds the reality that Kirk has been existing in, and he convinces Kirk to give up this bliss of memory, and the two of them exit the Nexus and go after Malcolm McDowell and save the day. Of course, Captain Kirk dies by a bridge falling on top of him, but what are you going to do?
Star Trek Generations was the first Star Trek thing I had ever seen. I saw it in the theater with my friend Chrissy Gonzalez. I had no idea what was going on. That was a very lonely and isolating experience because she had been like her dad was and probably still is a huge Trekkie, and he was very into TNG, and it was like their show. And I'm sure he was super psyched to bring Lisa along, who had no idea what was going on, and was very disturbed by the character of Data.
Oh, yeah, the emotion thing, and you don't like robots.
I love robots now.
I know, but you were an android racist back as a child.
I truly was.
Oh, geez.
Like Star Trek Generations is by no means the best Trek, and it is deeply flawed. But when it hits, it like the moments really land. And I think Picard and Kirk specifically inside the Nexus together is a really interesting sequence that I think stands as one of the best moments in the Star Trek franchise. So yeah, that gets my number one spot. Boom. Not Jaws, not The Shining, not Wrath of Khan, Star Trek Generations. Suck it, dorks.
Not William Money living out in that field in that old crappy little house with those two kids by himself in his twilight years.
I mean, his isolation is his own brain, man. Like thinking that he's a good, like he can live a normal life after the wretched horror show that he's already lived. No, sir, you're a murderer. You're a killer of women and children. You deserve to be shot down and die like a dog. And not live peacefully as an old man in San Francisco, which you do.
I just lent that movie to someone today, a coworker today, a young chap.
Oh.
Nice 22, I think he's 21, 22 years old. So I just bettered his life.
Yes.
So you're welcome, Corman Wagner. Anyway, my number one is obvious. No, it's not Mad Max wandering the wasteland by himself.
Then it's not obvious.
It should be, Brian, but I guess you don't know because you don't give a shit about your supposed friend. Looking at my list, I have it written down as Fortress of Solitude. But as I was looking at that, thinking about it, I guess I would go more specifically into what Kal-El feels being the only person of his kind on Earth and the isolation of that, and how that's examined in Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. When we see, granted, we do jump around in time as his time on Earth, but we see him walking the Earth like Kanan Kung Fu, basically trying to find himself and feeling alone and not feeling like he has a place of his own. There's a scene earlier on in the movie where Clark literally isolates himself in the closet because he's overwhelmed with his superhuman abilities, and he hasn't gotten a hold of who and what he is and how to control that. There's a running theme of trying to find his place, and that later on in BVS, Clark comes to the realization that Lois is his world, and that's he's here and he belongs here because she is everything to him. And so he finally feels like, okay, this is where I don't feel isolated anymore. I have somebody. I have this world. I'm here for these people. I'm going to be for these people. But leading up to that, there's a sense of isolation with that character, and as Zack Snyder had portrayed him, or had written him in his films. And so that is one thing that, and I repeatedly talked about that on the podcast when we talked about Man of Steel, is me liking that idea of Clark feeling like here's this this paradox. You have this person who has abilities like no one else, abilities that everyone else would look at and envy and want, and do all sorts of things for. But then that person, instead of he does have like this godlike quality, and he could rule over everybody, but just how isolating being so special can make you feel. And just the idea of, we look at him like a Superman who can do everything, and people are always like, oh, he doesn't have a weakness. With the weakness of him having a heart and him being able to feel lonely, and just the melancholy in that, in someone who in the eyes of everyone else is super, but in him he just feels so alone and isolated. So I just love that juxtaposition. And I love how Henry Cavill plays that character. I love the way Zack Snyder shoots Man of Steel and jumps around, and then showing him just trying to, him feeling like, I don't belong anywhere, or where do I belong? Where's my place? And again, Superman is my favorite superhero. So yeah, that's my number one in my Fistful of Isolation, is Kal-El / Clark / Superman's feeling of isolation here on Earth.
Yeah, I knew that. I figured that. I mean, honestly, man, you there's an argument that could be made that you could have chose like Godzilla or any other fandoms that you love, that you could have used as isolation.
Oh man, are we missing a huge thematic thing in Darren's life? Darren, do you feel isolated and alone like Superman / Godzilla / Mad Max?
You can also add /Tigger, as Tigger is my favorite character in Winnie the Pooh, and as a youngster, he was the one I most identified with because he was different, and he was the only Tigger. And when I was growing up as a person of mixed race, and my where I lived and the school system that I was in, that was predominantly African American, I was very unique, and I did feel isolated. I was different. I was teased. So I don't know. Maybe we are looking at touching on something much deeper, and I'm about to have a session. So let me lay on the couch and prop my feet up and have this cathartic moment with you. Thank you. No, but when you say it like that, maybe there is something there. I never even.
Well, everybody
connected
knows
those dots.
the number one thing everybody knows about Tiggers are wonderful things.
Yes.
Their tops are
Yes.
made out of rubber. Their bottoms are made out of springs. Everybody knows that.
As is my ass. Yes, that is true.
We know it. You can bounce a penny off of that thing.
Ladies and gentlemen, hit us up on social media and let us know what your fistful of isolation is. You can reach us at ItModcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Brian Young is the Turtle Dork. He's at the Turtle Dork on Twitter, at the Turtle Dork 1 on Instagram, and at Brian William Young on Facebook. Wife Dork is at Sidewalk Siren and at Baked Dork on Twitter and Instagram. She's also at Sidewalk Siren on Letterboxd. Brad Gullickson is at Mouth Dork on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Letterboxd, and Untapped. I am Darren Smith, the Disco Dork, on all social medias. Believe it or not, I did that while being concerned about this screeching sound that I heard outside in the parking lot.
Jesus.
There's a guy who may or may not be watching the opening of Flash Gordon, because I think I hear Queen underneath me in the house apartment below me. But anyway, that's the power of an ADHD mind. You can just do multiple things like that. Anyway, I'm Darren Smith, the Disco Dork, on all social medias. That's going to do it for us. What is our review, Cass?
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Teenage Mutant
That's
Ninja
right.
Turtles.
Turtles in a half shell.
Turtle power.
Total power.
Yeah, we're going to have a special review cast. We're going to do in honor of the 30th anniversary?
Yes.
30th
Right,
anniversary,
in honor of
and
the
the
30th
still awesome
anniversary.
screening that is still to come.
Yes, we are going to be taking a look at that 1990s gem of a film.
Oh, yeah.
The Turtle Dork's favorite, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So
Oh, yeah.
go
Love
back
it.
and rewatch that if you can. We're going to take a deep dive into that and explore that wonderful 90s film. And yeah, you can join along in the conversation. That's going to do it for us. Thank you all for listening. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Stay safe. Wash your hands, ladies and gentlemen. And until next time.